What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome to another episode of Found Footage Fridays with my co-host, Tom Reimer.
I'm really excited to talk about this episode.
Me
finally.
too. Me too.
This is one we have mentioned many times in the past, and I consider this classic not because it's one of the older found footage movies we've talked about, but classic because I think it really should be up there on the list of some of the greatest of found footage films.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. Totally agree. So yeah, I feel like we've talked about this one before, but we just this is our first episode on it, so I'm really excited. I'll look up the date real quick. Okay, so we are talking the 2016 found footage movie, Found Footage 3D.
Bam.
Yeah, I'll read the synopsis really quick. A group of filmmakers set out to make a horror film, but things take a left turn, when the entity from their movie escapes into the behind-the-scenes footage.
You described this in the most perfect way before we started filming tonight. So
yes,
you got to start with that.
So spoiler alert, Tom and I really liked this one. To me, what I have always said about this when I talk about it with other people is that found footage 3D is to found footage the subgenre as Scream is to the subgenre of slashers.
Absolutely.
This movie could not be more meta.
That's the word. That is the word.
Meta.
Yeah. But this movie is clearly made for people who love found footage, by people who love found footage. It knows what it is. It's poking fun at the genre, but at the same time making that exact movie it's poking fun of in a way that's not super cartoonish, despite the name of this movie, Found Footage 3D.
Yeah.
It does work. It actually is scary, and it's a legitimate found footage film.
And you really can watch it in 3D. The 3D and the 2D version are both on Shudder right now.
What I love about this movie, and this is how meta it is, but like they are talking in this movie about the things we talk about on this episode all the time.
Yes. Yes.
Why are they filming? Why are they carrying the camera? Why is the camera on her shoulder? That doesn't make sense. Why is why is the movie in 3D? That doesn't make sense. That sort of stuff. They're having these conversations. I think my favorite moment in the movie is towards the beginning, when, and this is just sort of like a sample of the sort of thing that happens in this film, is that they see a couple of guys sitting out on like a stoop in this town.
Yeah.
And they're like, let's use these guys. These guys look like they're perfect for the movie. And they're trying so hard to get them just to say like exactly what they want, stay away from there, don't go there. And the guys don't get it and can't really do it. And then the second half the crew goes away, and they're like, oh, where are you guys headed? And they tell them where they're actually going. The actual name of the place they're going. And the two old guys are like, one of them's like, don't go there. Nobody goes there. And the other one just gets up and walks away like scared. And it's like the most perfect, like meta. It's exactly what they were trying to get them to say, but actually, I probably just over-explained.
No, I love that scene. That's the entire movie is like that.
Yeah.
The entire thing.
And I actually feel like the acting in this movie is very good.
It is.
They're very good in this movie. Like legitimate actors. All of them. There's not like a weak person in this movie.
Totally
in that regard. And it's like, even if they weren't making a ridiculous sounding found footage movie, the setup is perfect. And they even one of them even points out how there's a couple moments of that's the biggest mistake in found footage movies.
And you're literally doing just that. Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to an actual haunted or purported haunted location, and they're supposedly, without saying, bad stuff actually happened there, which we'll share with you later. So I'm really curious to see how you rated this movie.
Yeah, I love this one. I'm a big fan of Scream, right? And
You
but
don't say.
part of that is because part of that is because of what it did for the subgenre of slashers. And I think that I walked away from this. So I rewatched it yesterday or the day before, just to kind of refresh my memory because I hadn't seen it in a while. But I watched this, I think, when it came out, and I remember watching it for the first time and walking away going, that was so fun. Like I
It is so
really
fun.
enjoyed that movie. And I felt the same way on my second watch of just being like, oh my God, I remember this. And like, this was so good. But yeah, I know for a fact I'm not going to have very many negative things to say. But if I rating this, I would give found footage 3D 9 takes out of 10.
Wow, great rating, great
Mhm.
rating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna rate this pretty high too. I just love so much about it, as I've already said.
Yeah. It's so good.
I would say the only reason it's not as high as maybe a few other found footage movies I really like is I don't think it's quite as scary as some of those. I do think has its certainly some scary moments in this movie, but I would say it's not like the most terrifying found footage movie, but that's okay.
No, I would agree with that.
Um, so I will rate this movie an 8.5
Okay.
takes out of 10, which is a
Yeah.
super high rating when you combine our two scores there. So
Yeah.
not
No, for
many
sure.
have ended up that high.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just a lot of what we're this meta stuff we're talking about. A lot of like the characters talking about the decisions they're making in the film that are
Yeah.
poor choices.
Mhm.
There's this there's this dynamic between the lead actress and the director. Clearly, they have a backstory, um, which is which is pretty good part of this. I would say of this movie.
It's
The two of
important.
them. It's very important. It gives some layers, obviously, to this. I think the special effects in this movie are awesome, and
Yeah.
in all the best ways. Like
Mhm.
they show stuff when they should, they don't show stuff when they shouldn't. Um, and that's just something we talk about in a lot of movies, right? Like
Mhm.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like this is a lot of like shadow playing.
It's
Yeah,
like it's enough teasing to keep you interested in wanting to see more until they decide to give you more, instead of you feeling like you don't get anything at all. And then there's what you do get is like lackluster. This doesn't feel like that at all.
no, no. Um,
Yeah.
the 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 the, the place they're staying at is legitimately disturbing. Like when they first get there, it's set
Yeah.
up. It looks like a crime scene.
It's crazy.
And he's like, and comically, the guy's like, they're cleaning it up, and he's like, it's maple syrup or something like that spilled on the floor. Came right up or something like that. It's
Yeah.
clearly not maple syrup. Um, yeah, I just have only good things to say. Was there anything you can point to that's a negative in this movie?
Um, I agree that the body horror and the gore effects were really good.
Very good.
I was not like a super big fan of the other type of effect that's used in this.
The shadow, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. I think I don't hate it. I've seen way worse, but I just think that like the because it is what it is, and you're not quite to spoilers, right? So I'll be careful what I say, but
Right.
because of what it is, I found it to be less scary
Okay.
in that form.
Interesting. I'll be curious
So
to hear you explain that.
yeah, I feel like a lot of the reason that I rated this so high is more because of the commentary and the love for found footage that this has.
Yeah.
and it's very clear what they were trying to do. And I agree that the acting and all of that was really strong. And I laughed so much watching this film. And I know I just said this recently because I don't normally say this, but this was super well balanced with humor and not humor, like very well balanced.
This is like the perfect balance, I think.
It is.
But isn't that what you would say about the Scream movies?
Mm-hmm.
For a slasher?
And really, usually what I mean when I say well balanced, when I'm talking about horror and comedy, I mean only a little bit of comedy, because it's not, if it's too funny to me, it becomes silly, and then it's not horror. And I don't gatekeep what other people consider horror, but for me, it's not horror. Like, I need it to be more of that than the funny. And that's what I mean when I say it's well balanced. When I say it's well balanced, I mean less comedy, more horror.
The phrase that bothers me when I hear it is horror comedy. I would not put this in that category.
No,
this
not
is a horror movie that has some funny meta stuff in it. It is not a comedy. If I hear the phrase horror comedy, I'm almost always turned off, and it rarely ever works, in my opinion.
I'm so picky about horror comedies. And I will tell you, the ones that are labeled that I like are usually ones that are exactly like I said. They're actually really more horror than they are, you know, the comedy. Or they're like dark comedies. Like, I consider Black Christmas, the original one, I consider that a dark comedy because it's got some pretty funny moments in it, but it's mostly horror. So, and this does not give you too much of the funny that it's, and it's thing because like you're talking about like the acting being really good. It plays into the relationship dynamics too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like because this really kind of has like a lot in it. It's horror. It's got a little bit of comedy stuff. It's got drama. It's got, I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot going on.
What subgenre of found footage does this fit into? Is this a new one?
I don't know.
Is it people?
I think it's multiples, right? Because it's, all right, let's go into spoilers so I can say more.
Spoilers.
So I would, this goes under possession.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Almost goes under haunted house, depending on how you want to look at it.
It does go under haunted house. Yep.
I don't know because
meta found footage. This would be the only one.
It would be the only one, right?
Leslie Jordan was that? Not Leslie Jordan. Leslie Vernon. Yeah, Leslie Vernon. Yeah. That's meta found footage, right?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Not
as in your face meta as this is, but yeah, I would agree with that.
Right.
That's probably most of it, right?
That's got to be.
I mean, you couldn't do filmmaker found footage because that's like 90% of the film footage. Okay, so what did you laugh when he says your character needs a reason to shoot in 3D? And he was like, I'm a 3D enthusiast. Did that make you laugh?
That one. There's also the why. Why are they still filming? They actually do that, and they talk about how they need the flashlight on the camera, and the guy's like, no, you don't actually need to be recording to have the flashlight on. And he was like, well, the viewers don't know that. And he's like, yeah, they do.
They do.
But he's like, yeah, well, whatever. We're doing that anyways. I'm the director. So like, there was like a lot of that great sort of clearly.
Oh, good.
They've done what we do, and they sit around and they pick out these things.
They talk about all these things.
Oh, yeah.
I thought when he said, because how many movies have we seen that have lazy plot lines like that, where it's like, well, because he just wants to.
Yeah, right. And that's pretty much why everything happens in this movie.
I know. I thought that was good.
And how many times do they go to a haunted location and one of the guys knows it's haunted, but doesn't tell everybody else that it's haunted? Like that has happened a million times.
City. Yeah, this is trope after trope after trope. And I love this one. I think it's interesting because it almost, in parts of it, do feel probably like what it is like for filmmakers that want to make a found footage movie and what those real conversations look like.
Absolutely.
He's like, how do we make it different? And he says, he's like, well, how do we make it different from every other piece of crap found footage movie? And he's like, oh, I'll show you how. And like, I don't know, like, it was just like a very, as almost like it's got to really be like that in some of these conversations. Like, how do we set this found footage movie apart from all the other found footage movies that are there? I don't know, just some of those things I thought were like really good. Like,
Yeah,
I really,
there is that whole scene. I love that scene, and anyone who's watched a lot of found footage would, where he's literally talking about like there, other than like the Blair Witch Project and maybe a couple others, there hasn't been like a good found footage movie in like decades. Basically, is what they're saying, and why suddenly are we going to be the ones to make a new one?
yeah.
Um, it's certainly not going to be because it's in 3D. But that whole scene where he's like basically tearing apart found footage movies was really funny, I thought.
It was really funny. And it's interesting because I think like I think it is done in such a way where it is absolutely poking fun and talking trash about, but it's still, you still know that it's coming from like a wholesome place. It's not like a found footage is actual like cuz they obviously have like a lot of found footage knowledge, but I just think it's interesting, you know, obviously it's like you feel that way about found footage, but then you're making, I just think the balance is good. Like I didn't feel
Yeah.
like this was like, you know, stepping on found footage as like a subgenre. It was very clear what they were trying to do.
The only moment I feel like where the comedy, and I'm totally fine with it, but where the comedy pulled me out a little bit is at the very end of the movie, when the actress is in the car with the guy who's rescuing her. It's like the
And
last
she
shot.
says, yeah.
He says something like, "You forgot about the biggest rule of found footage," or something like that, when she's supposed to be possessed.
Mhm.
Um, and I assume what's the biggest? What is she suggesting is the biggest rule of found footage? Don't put the camera down. Is it that?
No, no one
That's what
survives the found footage movie.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was because we talk about the moment you put down the camera and it's looking at you. Here's how like nerdy I am. Like that's what I thought she was talking about. Like because every time someone in a found footage movie puts the camera down and it's like they step back, something terrible happens to them. So I
Or
thought,
maybe it's that too. I immediately just thought it was like you can't
well,
survive it.
definitely that is true.
So
Also,
like why did you save me when you know the biggest rule of found footage is no one can survive a found footage?
that's probably what it actually is.
But
Yeah.
I think you're right too though, because you're right. Whenever we get those shots, we immediately go, well, that
So
jump scare got me. I forgot that happened. Would you like,
but I have a feeling about something. So you mentioned that how low some of the ratings like were for this on like Rotten Tomatoes and whatnot.
mhm.
I don't know if you read them aloud here, but like
I
I
didn't, but we
feel
talked about him before.
yeah. So I feel like in my opinion, don't watch this movie until you have ingested quite a bit of found footage because I feel like you'll appreciate this movie a lot
Uh,
more. If you
I
just
agree.
watch this as like I'm gonna go watch a horror movie
No,
or something like that, you won't appreciate
completely.
it really
Completely
because
agree.
half of this movie is wouldn't mean anything to you unless you have watched a lot of found footage films. So
Totally
um,
agree.
I feel like that's why it's rated so.
That's a good point. If people have seen Blair Witch or a couple of other more mainstream ones and they're like, oh, I want to see this because it's found footage movie and it's a horror movie and it's a cool premise, right? Because 3D's that was a thing.
Yeah.
And so I bet you're right. I bet people went into it with a completely different expectation and see, and I had already seen a ton of found footage films by the time I saw it for the first time, but I didn't know what I was getting into. So it ended up being like a really pleasant like experience because at the end of it I was like, that movie had so much to say. And I was so in love with it. Like the first time I watched it, I literally walked away and I feel like we talked about this when we talked about the Gracefield incident, because we always talk about how like, you know, you don't usually walk away from a found footage movie feeling all like, you know, like happy and go lucky.
Yeah.
But this one made me feel energized because it was
Yeah.
like, I really just loved what it was doing. You know,
I actually
I love
walk away from 90% of found footage movies. I walk away feeling like, oh,
that.
like
Yeah,
quick, turn the lights on. Like I feel
totally.
like, like that was very uncomfortable.
Mhm.
It all end terribly, and this movie ends, terribly for the characters. But it's you're still in a funny way. You're still sort of smiling because it's not because of what happened to them. But
It just
like,
speaks to you and you're like a found footage guru like
yeah,
Tom and
yeah,
myself.
yeah,
You know what scene I really thought was cool? So we talked about pace. We talk about pacing constantly. So when we get the shot of them making up in the kitchen
yeah.
and she gets the hammer and knocks the heck out of him, that scene, because again, I had only seen it the one time. It had been, it's 2023. It's been a minute since I'd seen it. And I was like, oh, I think I sort of remember this. And then it gets to the part where like the blood is coming out of the door, or I mean, from under
Yeah.
the door. Oh my God. And then that guy
Gross.
standing there and he's like, are you guys messing with me? And the door like what like flies off and like hits him and knocks
That's what
him
I was
out.
sort of saying. Like, yeah, those
Oh,
effects were for
so
it almost
good.
makes it feel like a bigger budget movie where I don't know if it was,
It did
but like,
have a bigger budget. But go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like that, not in a really a negative way either, but there were just certain elements that made it feel um, a little more polished than some found footage movies we talk about. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe just their cameras were better. It could be as simple as that. But or and they had they were using boom mics. They were using actual sound equipment.
Yeah.
So that could be it too. Um, but yeah,
I It was an Indiegogo film.
no way.
They raised $35,000 to make it.
That's amazing. I had no idea that's what this was.
And
Well, I
the
like it
the
even more.
3D, the two 3D cameras alone that were used to shoot the film,
Yeah.
$5,000.
Wow.
So
That's really impressive. That makes me like this movie even more. I didn't
I
know it
did
was.
not know it was Indiegogo. That is awesome. I had no idea. That's
I would have
amazing.
I would have contributed to that project.
I would have too if I had heard anything about. I would now if there was a found footage Indiegogo now. I would have heard. We're more likely to hear about it now.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
I
Especially
had no
wow,
idea, but a little over $35,000.
really interesting. Yeah, I mean, are there people out there that haven't seen this yet? Like, if you are out there and you still haven't seen found footage, you've watched a bunch of our episodes, like, get out there, go see
And
this. Like,
watch found footage.
this is a great found footage movie.
And I think it's so interesting. There's trends with specific films, and really interesting ones. I feel like with found footage films, this one just started showing up again recently. I just
Yeah.
started seeing people posting about it again for the
I
first
think,
time in a long time.
well, you recently had that found footage documentary on
So
Shudder,
people are
and
finding it.
people are, well, and I think a lot of people are rediscovering found footage too.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
if you're searching for found footage suddenly, this has got to be one that pops up. It literally has found footage in the title, and it's, as far as I know, the only found footage movie that has found footage in the title. So, right?
I know there's another one. What is
There
it?
is.
The found footage. I know there's another one. I feel like we talked about it. I can't remember, but I know
Maybe
there's
I'm
another
blanking
one.
on it.
But to
Okay.
your point, though, it's not only that, but it's considered. I mean, it's relatively mainstream. Like a lot of people,
Yeah.
enough people have seen it that it's gonna come up in your Google. It's gonna come up in your top 5 found or top 50 found footage list or whatever. It's gonna show up. You're gonna see this one. This is not one that no one's heard of.
And you don't have to watch it in 3D to appreciate it. The
I
2D
know. I just
version is
watched it in
totally
2D.
great. That's what I've seen, 2D. So
Yeah. It didn't have
Yeah.
any bearing at all on the experience.
no, nothing.
One day I would like to get glasses to try it out. I think that would be cool. I don't even know if my
Be fun.
TVs do 3D. I don't know I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure it out. But
I
one day it would be
think
cool.
there are 2 versions of the movie available.
Yeah, both of them are on Shudder.
Yeah.
So no ads. Yeah, I love this one. I'm glad we finally talked about it.
Finally,
Mhm.
I love to do this every now and again. Find one that's we've criminally passed over for a long time. So this is one.
Yeah. I agree.
Ganja.
One day. That's gonna be a long episode. Just to warn you. That might not be a multiple
we are neglecting that movie.
Yeah.
It
And
is
the other one
huge.
that I always think of when I think of that one, Noroi.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few big players we hadn't talked about yet, but that's on
Yep.
purpose.
We'll get to them.
We've done
Yeah,
some indie, we've done some new ones.
We haven't done
some-
Paranormal Activity yet. Yeah.
I think because we keep going back and forth about wanting to do it as maybe as a series or do
Yeah.
it as talking about the series versus just the individual movies.
Yeah. It's coming. We'll get there.
Mhm. Yeah. And if you have found footage Rex, as always, put them in the comments. We
Yep.
do watch the movies that are recommended to us.
Often.
Yeah. So cool. Well,
All right.
that's our episode finally on Found Footage 3D.
What are we watching next? We don't know.
We don't know.
That's the answer.
That's in the future. We'll figure it out. We got time.
Tune in next Friday and find out.
That's right. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us on this Found Footage Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Have a great week coming up. And Tom and I will see you next week.
See you then.